Yes, and it's much simpler than you think. I believe when I'm done here, this theory will have answered why Willcare is an intended lie made up by William, how there never was a DCI, the existence of the shadows, a satisfying reasoning for Molten MCI, and all without pulling a retcon card or theoretically changing the contents of the box. That being said, there's plenty of room for a retcon to mess up this answer, or that retcon snuck its way in, but this was an attempt to understanding the series chronologically and how I've been overthinking this series from the beginning. Firstly, some terminology for anyone that's new to theorizing or just new to the community in general. Willcare is an umbrella term used for any theory consisting of William Afton, the main antagonist, caring for his children at any point or in any way, whether that be he was a normal father turned evil or an evil man who loved his children in disgusting ways, and many more fall under this term. MCI refers to the missing children's incident. DCI refers to the Dead Children's Incident, which takes place in 1987, where 5 children were assumed dead, shown in the Save Them minigame. Molten MCI refers to the original 5 MCI children going on to inhabit the Funtime animatronics, as shown in the 4th closet. Shattered Victim is the belief that the Bite Victim from FNAF 4 went on to inhabit all 4 or 5 of the MCI kids, leaving pieces of himself, and also explains why they're connected to the memories of the Bite Victim, even though it's not their memories, inside of FNAF 3's Happiest Day minigames, or at least that's how I've interpreted that theory. GoldenDuo is the belief that 2 spirits exist in Golden Freddy, assuming they're a singular entity, that being the 5th child, often referred to as Cassidy, which I will use going forward for simplicity, and Bite Victim, the result of assuming that the Fazbear Frights books were parallels and meant to mirror Andrew and Jake. I don't think I'm going to be touching on that as much with inside of this theory. With those out of the way, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the DCI. To be fair, I've wanted to ditch this idea of the DCI for a while, back when I was having issues making it work with my old theories. Narcissistic, yes, but after the release of the movie, that idea was solidified to me. Now, don't get me wrong, assuming that just because an event happens in the books and the movie that it must occur in the games will leave you wondering if William ever had 3 children, but given Security Breach heavily implies he does, we have to take continuity parallels with a grain of salt. But for the sake of this one argument, we have the Silver Eyes saying there was 1 MCI, Frights saying there was only 1 MCI, and the movie very heavily suggesting there was only 1 MCI, at least until FNAF 2 comes out disproving this claim. Not to mention, in those videos, as bad as they were, my argument that they physically can't take place without being altered in some way still stands, at least assuming these were children to begin with. An idea that has been floating around for a while is the idea that something borrowed something new. A teaser put on Scott's game page was suggesting that the Withers went on to also control the toys, as if they were split between the 2 of them, which would allow for them to be possessed without another set of kids, and would make those dead children likely representatives of the MCI souls, holding on to the location similar to the crying child we've seen. I'm pretty positive Follow Me wasn't showing us actual corpses walking around the safe room, but then what about the fact that this game is called Save Them, or the You Can't Answer from William attacking? Well, for a second, let's talk about Remnant and what it is. I think I'm sticking with my interpretation of Remnant as I suggested in my Save Them video, that being the minigames we are playing are physical manifestations of Remnant, the memories. One of these types of Remnant is Dark Remnant, often referred to as Agony. These shadow figures and glitches are all the result of their agony. Agony that can leak into the physical world. Back on track, I believe these spirits were implanted on the suits by the puppet, but after being torn apart, pieces of their remnants were placed inside of the toys, leaving pieces of their agony to haunt the building itself. The blood everywhere is no more real than the posters shown in FNAF 1. The Freddy shown here is trying to put the pieces of the children back together, because these are their memories, and without them, they lose themselves. But William stops them from being able to do anything about it, leaving the others to act like animals. But Charlotte is aware. Why doesn't Charlotte save them instead? The same reason it doesn't save them while Jeremy is on the clock. The music box keeps it still and prevents it from moving. But if that's the case, why is the puppet moving here? because that's not the physical puppet. That's, for now, what we'll call the shadow puppet. This isn't the one example of this character, as throughout the nights of FNAF 2, we can see hallucinations of the puppet, which I believe both are the result of Charlotte's agony, no different than the shadow animatronics. Not even including the fact that later on in FNAF 6, we would later see that the addition of the tears on the puppet mask were the result of Charlotte's agony. I believe this is an extension of herself outside of her physical body. If you were insane, you could probably try and argue that JJ might be her own agony being given Phantom Puppet's jump scare, which both seem to come from under the table, but I'm trying to rebuild my credibility here, not ruin it further. So, we fixed save them, but now we have a bunch of holes we have to fill. After all, I've suggested that the shadow animatronics were agony beings made up from the MCI and DCI. Actually, this is another issue I've had with the original trilogy. If FNAF 3 was meant to be putting the bite victim to rest, shouldn't bite victim have some representation before this event as well? After all, Happiest Day is supposedly the good ending of not just FNAF 3, but presumably the whole trilogy. It may be cliche, but what if Shadow Freddy was connected to the bite victim? And vice versa, that would imply RXQ, or RWQ, was connected to Cassidy. Unoriginal and lazy, sure. Impractical, no. This actually started from a pretty disliked film theory about a certain cop being a robot, where I was reminded that in the movie novelization, William is capable of using Garrett like he can the other kids. In fact, this entire series has always pounded in the idea that these children don't remember what happened, but it's never explored how Charlotte and Cassidy can remember while the others can't. Pulling from our Save Them discussion, I believe this is because removing pieces of the Remnant can leave holes in the memories of these characters. Because William split the MCI, they can't remember who they are anymore, and those scraps inside the toys aren't brought back until presumably FNAF 3, allowing their pieces to be put back together. I believe this is what happened to the bite victim, as his pieces were split amongst all 4 of the main cast in an attempt to bring them all to life, but instead it left bite victim not recognizing how horrible his father was and creating the existence of Shadow Freddy. William uses this being to his advantage as shown in the Follow Me minigame. Shadow Freddy's other 2 locations are either in parts and service surrounded by the machines that house his Remnant, or his final appearance in FNAF 3, which suggests he was still around, but we'll return to him slightly later. Oh yeah, I suppose Nightmare is also called Shadow Freddy, who appears darker instead of purple, similar to that of RXQ, and seemingly knows he is the result of William. So take that as you will. Now let's tackle this version of Cassidy. In the security logbook, it suggested that Cassidy is capable of contacting bite victim despite seemingly not having a physical body, which would suggest Cassidy is also not stuck in a physical form. One might argue that bite victim says he's unable to see, while Cassidy presumably can, but I believe this is referring to the black void that we see in the FNAF 4 minigames, as it is a being made of agony, and that would likely be tied to him getting bit, which, you know, would make it difficult to see. Or could be referring to being unable to see the truth of what he is, or who he is, etc. Not to mention, this whole interaction is about Cassidy trying to find out what the bite victim can remember. So we have a character that's trying to help bite victim remember things and is capable of speaking to him at all, and goes on to ask if he had a Fredbear plush growing up. If only we had a Fredbear plush that was capable of talking to bite victim and helped put the pieces in place for the bite victim to remember. And again, if only we had another character who acts in a very similar way, a character that's agony would be tied to her murderer, but also have similar properties to Shadow Freddy, and one that could walk throughout all of his memories, and the one who gives the cake to bite victim, allowing Happiest Day to occur. Of course, this means the spirit in Follow Me, who convinces William into the spring Bonnie suit, can't be Cassidy, as Shadow Bonnie appears here, which, to be honest, I prefer a lot, actually, as I think as to who this is much easier to answer. as this event feels like a direct parallel to Give Gifts, Give Life, with the puppet trapping William in the same fate that the children had to suffer. All of their agony then went on to possess William, forcing him to stay alive while he rotted away, and William would learn how to control this agony, creating the Phantom animatronics. Only when RxQ has Mike relieve those memories, it leaves William with just Cassidy, or at least she thinks it's that way. I believe the reason William destroyed the animatronics was an attempt to recreate more beings like Shadow Freddy, and he somewhat succeeded at the cost of his life. However, he also had a backup plan, which we end up seeing explored in the later series, as the physical remnant is still around and is later used to create the fun times, allowing for a satisfying way for Molten MCI to not just be a fluke, but an open-ended answer instead. I believe he used his other two children to test these memory experiments, having Michael suffer the nightmare experiments, whereas he took advantage of his daughter's death to take her apart, removing the memories of him being abusive and horrible towards her. That was the point of the box, the point of the scooper, all in order to create the perfect servants that would obey at his beck and call. They would never know the horrible things that he did to them, because he knows how to pretend. Where this theory falls flat is the specific animatronics and death placement. My current brainstorm is that Cassidy was killed with the MCI, but was stuffed into the suit that bite victim to see what would happen to a spring-locked victim. However, while William goes on to feel a presence, it doesn't seem to move like the others. I believe at this point, this suit has then been moved over to FNAF 2, allowing for her to move around as Shadow Bonnie, while at her death location, she can still manifest as Golden Freddy. Because all the pieces are at FNAF 2, Bite Victim is now capable of manifesting with her Golden Freddy at that location, but this is short-lived given the toys are scrapped and theoretically separated. I mean, the dude does go for your head as a floating head. It does not get much more obvious than that. But even this has a bit of continuity errors and relies on headcanons to explain their manifestation, but overall I feel extremely satisfied with this theory, and I believe it leaves room for the books to be canon. Maybe. I'm not completely finished with them, so I can't give you a certain answer. I have a few more brain rots in the system, so stay around here about how William's father might be William's motive, or why separate continuities exist for the very reason shown in this series. If you enjoyed or want to adjust this slightly, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all again soon. Matane.